Hello and welcome back to Bearded Heretics YouTube. So this video is a conversation with me and a couple of people from the YouTube community that I've been a part of. And essentially we're talking about the kind of problems that atheists face and the kind of the issues that I've seen within the atheist community and some of the stuff that I would like to see from the atheist community in the future and the group's view on that as well. It's just something I want to preface before going into the discussion, which is there's a discussion about the atheist community of Austin, and I think that it will be really easy for people who are fans of that group of people and for people who are maybe part of that group of people to kind of misinterpret what's been said, or not misinterpret, but see it as an invalid criticism. And what I would say is that I appreciate the atheist community of Austin. A lot of the people that are part of that group really helped me to figure out my atheism and to become a little bit more knowledgeable in some of the areas that I have struggled with in the past. But that doesn't mean that they're perfect, and it doesn't mean that they're immune to criticism, and it certainly doesn't mean that they're kind of version of atheists that they have to have adopted in the kind of like political and social context that they're in applies to everyone outside of that context. And I think it's just worth bearing that stuff in mind when you see this discussion, and it might be worth even thinking about if anyone from the atheist community of Austin kind of watches this and thinks that we're being unfair. But you know, I think maybe I'm making a mountain out of a molehill here, but I just think it's worth saying because you know, I have people that I really appreciate who are part of that group, and I think that I don't want people to think that I'm being unfair to them. You know, if anything, I see their worth, and there's parts of it that I want it to improve. That's it. So without further ado, I hope you enjoy. Cool. So I guess this is the weirdest thing, because I feel like when you're live, introductions are really easy because you're actually introducing it to people, but like when it's like here, it's like awkward kind of thing. I always struggle with that part. So I guess as an introduction, so this is Bidit. That is going in as well. This is Bearded Heretics YouTube, and I guess I'm here with Joe. Sorry, introduce these people: Joe, Dave, and Philip, who are from Answers in Reason, who I also do videos with now. So I guess I want to set you guys up just with like kind of the reason I want to have this discussion, and then we can have the discussion. So I guess the purpose that I had for coming onto YouTube and Twitter as like an atheist person is because I mean, the reason that I'm an atheist is because of, like, you know, not believing in God and stuff, but I didn't necessarily have all the philosophical stuff that I've since learned since knowing you guys, which has been quite a short amount of time. So I've been an atheist for a number of years without that stuff. And what I see in the atheist community online is like very much conversations just on that level. So, you know, you don't get the kind of like the more mundane conversations and the what it's like for a layperson who is an atheist. And I think that is a problem because it means that everyday people aren't seeing the benefits that atheism has and thinking that they can only get that from religion. And then maybe they'll turn to religion in like times of like distress, like for instance, bereavement or something. So I guess I want to have a conversation about, one, whether you guys agree with that, and two, you know, what are some of the things that the community could be doing in order to try and facilitate that a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I'd agree somewhat with that. I think that there are often negative experiences. I think there's times that you want answers, and there aren't necessarily answers that you can have or find anywhere. And you might start looking in places like religion because they might offer you support. You might jump on the internet and get caught up in some form of tribalism as well, which can push you one way or the other. And yeah, I think there's, in that regard, one thing that is often said by many atheists online is that we only agree on one thing. We're not a community. And I mean, there is a community of people who are atheists. There's like little cliques and bigger ones as well. But in some respects, it's right. Atheism at its core, it is only unified by that position on the topic. And even then, there's arguments over whether it's a belief gods don't exist or a lack of belief in gods. But if we're just, for the sake of the conversation, just talk about non-theists and atheists, all as sort of some entity here. Yeah, I'd have to agree. There isn't necessarily much that does unify us in that regard. We've all approached it differently. We've all had different experiences. Some people have grown up atheists. Most have come from some form of religion. And I think that is in itself is difficult, because if you are used to the community aspect of being in a religion and then suddenly being alone, especially if you're in a place where everyone else is religious, that can be like a bit of, well, what do I do now?
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the reasons a lot of people go through different religions. They might, when they first leave a religion, oh, well, no, I think this one's bollocks, but actually this one sounds okay. Oh, well, no, that actually I found out something wrong with this one. Well, what about this one? So, yeah, I'd have to agree that there isn't necessarily much that atheism, at least on the surface, offers people as comfort and community.
Yeah, and I guess that's exactly like kind of what I see as well. And I think part of the problem I have is that usually I think, and I guess this is less so the case in the UK, but even then I think it is the case because, well, I'll say what I'm going to say. It can be quite isolating to be an atheist in a community. So where do you go? You go to the internet, right? Which is the hub of connectivity. You can engage with anyone in the world. And then when you reach the internet and you go on YouTube and you type atheist in, you get the the like kind of atheist community of Austin stuff. You get Rationality Rules, you get Cosmic Skeptic, and they are all very just like high brow academic philosophical individuals, and they don't all. The other thing is they don't necessarily get it right, and I think one thing that I've learned, and I'm not sure how much I lean into this. I think there is a level of like kind of dogmatism in that. They're kind of like, it's either our way or the highway kind of thing. But I think that's kind of not necessarily enforced by the people at the top of that. So I'm not sure Matt Dillahunty would be, for instance, would be, what's the word, advocating for that kind of approach. But I think the people that like follow him and listen to his arguments and stuff are the ones that are enforcing that kind of otherness. I don't know if you guys would agree with that, but then it creates a bubble that if you're not our type of atheist, then you're not an atheist kind of thing, and then people get rejected again, or they feel like they have to, be the philosophy guy.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I think things like, the atheist experience, I watched it a few times when I was first getting into my online atheism thing, and there were some videos that I found entertaining. But the more I watched it, the worse it seemed to get, and the more sour I came towards it, because it was very, very aggressive. and it was, you're not answering the questions the way I want you to, so I'm slamming the phone down on you. And there are lots of talking past each other, and I think there's a lot of aggression there. And I see a lot of the other online atheists, whether it's a YouTube show or the way they're interacting on places like Twitter, also being incredibly aggressive keyboard warriors. I mean, hell, when I first got into debating online, I was one of them dicks,
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I was when I was like, when I first kind of like started to, well, because I guess I came into atheism kind of slowly, gradually over a long period of time, and it kind of manifested itself properly when I was at university, where I started exploring the scientific method, and then became quite an empiricist and being like, there's nothing that isn't scientific, and if you can't prove it, then it doesn't exist, that kind of thing, all that like and I guess I was watching atheist YouTubers back then as well, and it was like kind of, I think that was prior to people like Cosmic Skeptic, Rationality Rules, who I think are a little bit softer in that approach. Well, they do philosophy and stuff, so, and it was like very much like The Amazing Atheist, and it was just angry scientism. I don't know which one it is, but it's that kind of approach, and and I was just like, I kind of fed into it a little bit, and I became angry, and like was just angry at people who didn't believe in evolution and stuff like that. And it's like, does it matter to me? No. Do you need to have an understanding of the theory of evolution to be an atheist? No. It's crazy that it's just there just seems to be a box that or like a gatekeeping that happens in certain communities, and it frustrates me, and I want to break those barriers down. So and whether you're like a hard atheist, soft atheist, we should be able to unite in some degree to be able to help people cope with difficult times, and let them know that it's okay to not have to believe in an afterlife, and you can still understand about like you can still have a not traumatic experience of death in that situation, or not as traumatic experience of death, and stuff like that.
I think what you say with all the online YouTubers and things that you were watching, and the way it changed your personality and made you feel towards other people, it's almost a form of indoctrination. In the same way that like the alpha courses Christians might do, where they're constantly hammering this stuff into you. It's kind of the atheist equivalent of that, and it gets you thinking that way and acting that way and repeating these catchphrases and certain memes, and you stop thinking about these things. Rationality may have led you to atheism, but that sort of reasoning goes out the way, and you've then got this almost fixed script and automatic responses. And I think that in itself can push people who might be on the fence or doubting things away, because how many times do we see it online where someone might be asking a question, they might be doing it completely earnestly, yet the response is a meme, and oh, you're an idiot, oh, prove it, and all of that sort of thing. You just really.
Yeah,
I think the thing that I would say is I sort of understand why all atheist YouTubers and in general, like atheism in this community is like often talking about beliefs, sometimes talking about philosophy and the stuff, because ultimately, believing in a God is a belief in a sense. So it's a natural progression to talk about beliefs. What is a belief? What is knowledge, and all of these things. And at some point you get into philosophy, like when you ask these questions. So I think that it isn't sort of like, I understand how it comes to be, but at the same time I also agree with you that there is sort of a side of this that is lacking in a way, because there is no network of support for these other things that come with atheism, right? Like there are some consequences to belief in a God, or not belief in a God, let's just say, and sometimes people who do believe in God and find great grounding for all these other sets of questions because they believe in a God, when then they when they found themselves questioning this and then losing their belief, then they sort of are lost. And I agree that there is sort of a gap there that that should be in one way or another filled.
Absolutely.
I think that's why in the beginning humanism was promoted quite a lot.
Yeah.
But that seems to have gone by the wayside now. And I don't know if you remember Atheism Plus.
I don't know.
Yeah, that was another
Plus. I keep seeing it, but seeing other people say about
it. Was I think it was PZ Meyer. And it was all based around a particular community, but it was about being as inclusive as possible and dealing with humanist issues and fighting for the rights of minority communities and the oppressed. But it sort of got pushed aside because everybody felt, oh, well, it's adding dogma to atheism and people not agreeing with what was being promoted, and that all kind of got pushed aside. So there has been attempts to bring this stuff into atheism. It's just they've not gone particularly well, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I think there's this idea in the atheist community that atheism needs to remain as pure as possible. That it needs to stick to just being a lack of belief in God or believe God doesn't exist, not believing in God. If it goes beyond that, then you're tainting atheism as such.
Yeah. I guess the problem I have with humanism specifically, because I joined the local humanist society and I get email updates. I haven't done any face-to-face meetings, but again, it seems to just be about big issues, about, in country X, atheists are being murdered. In, make sure you click this thing on the census or this thing, and it's like, I don't want. That's not why I joined. I didn't join for that. I joined for the human element of it. The idea that, because the way I feel about most people's view on religion is not that they I don't think they listen to William Lane Craig or any other apologist. I don't think they have a clue. Most religious people don't really get into apologetics, and I think that why isn't that the case for atheists? If somebody doesn't believe in something or but believes that something doesn't exist, why do they need to have the philosophy, and why is there not people going, you can well, even just like understanding your purpose or your your motivations to do things, you have to figure that out on your own. That's tough. And humanism
I
should
think
be
a lot
about
of it
that.
comes down to.
Oh,
sorry, Luke. What was that?
No, go. No, I was finished.
I think a lot of that comes down to, again, the craving for a community, even though we say we don't want one. And I think that there is part of us that do want that community feel. And we've lost our community, at least those who were religious and had that community. And they're trying to fit themselves into a new community. And there are certain things this new community say. Now, I don't think the average online atheist gets too much into the philosophy in general. They might get more into the theology, and so they might address the apologetics. And they'll tend to do it through science more than anything else. And if it's not prove it, you can't prove it. But there are certain things that happen in these communities that all atheists start saying. And there's almost like this thing, well, I need to, I'm thrown off my chains. I'm completely free of religion. I now need to fit into this one. And there's this need to prove yourself that you are part of this community. So you get involved with all of these attacks on apologetics and things like that.
Do you know a really good example of this is Ethan from Your Friendly Neighborhood Atheist. So he's quite involved with the kind of like the atheist community of Austin guys. He does a show with Jenna Belk, and you know, I mean, he did that interview with Khalil Allah, and he didn't know the stuff about philosophy. And like, my view is that I don't think he enjoyed that interview very much. I don't think he shouldn't have had the interview, but his focus shouldn't have been on the philosophy. It should have been on the stuff that he knows about, and he's very good. And his motivation is to bring a community together. He wants to have like atheist YouTubers that aren't atheist YouTubers. So it's like gaming with an atheist, like an atheist gamer channel or atheist cooking channel or something like that. So it takes the stigma away from it just being about the philosophy stuff. But he's getting drawn into that kind of like that philosophy aspect, and his content is becoming more focused on that stuff. And it's like, why? This is exactly what the community needs. It needs this stuff, but you know, we need to just remove that a little bit and just be like, you can have a channel that's like by atheists, where they're proudly atheist, and it not be like this philosophy aspect. And I think that's where he was starting, and now he's getting drawn into it. And I would have preferred to see that interview from like a human perspective, where he's talking about how he feels, and you know, the emotional stuff about changing your religion like that, and how that impacted his relationships with people and his relationships with other atheists and stuff like that. That would have been what I'd prefer to see from that interview, personally. And I think it would have been a better interview.
Yeah, I still haven't actually got round to watching that one yet. I do intend to do it.
I mean, it's good. It's just, it's very clear. Like, and I don't think Ethan knows nothing about philosophy. I think he has a very he has a layman's knowledge of it. He has a basic understanding of it. But Khalil Allah has obviously done his research and has a very good understanding of it.
I think the problem there with him, one of the reasons he got so convinced by the arguments was because he had no philosophy in his tool belt to start with.
Well, he knows more than I do, but
yeah, but I think that's it. Sorry, go for it.
You know, I'm not sure exactly how much he knew, because like I've seen some of his stuff. He seems to be like, he seems to understand some things very well, but sometimes I feel like he really sort of is not that sure about stuff. But he definitely has a community around him that know their like they know their stuff. Like, they're very, very competent.
Can I just interrupt quickly? Sorry, is it the same guys that interviewed Aaron Ra? Is that the same community?
Yeah, I think they are. And from what I've seen, they're really good, and they're also very respectful. From like they have an approach that I think is like very, very positive towards this whole, at least within the philosophical conversation. I mean,
it's the Islamic equivalent of street epistemology.
Right.
Yeah.
Sort of.
Right, I see. Okay.
Like, they break down the belief and then go into it and examine how they're looking at various things and looking at kind of contradictions in their knowledge base and ideas about how to gain knowledge.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose, like, the way I see this is, I'm not sure exactly how much I agree with a lot of what is being said here, in the sense that, like, for instance, the whole Atheist Plus thing, I don't really think it was that good of a move, personally.
Oh, no, it wasn't. It's just, it was an attempt to
Yeah. Like, I definitely agree that there needs to be more, like, there is a heavy stigma from religious people sometimes on atheism and on what it means to be an atheist, you know, and you hear the memes from the religious side a lot, right? Like, what it implies. And I've seen a tweet the other day where it was one apologist that was like, yeah, if you're a consistent atheist, then there is no meaning, whatever, right? Like, this whole, and this is sort of ingrained in many societies, you know, that if you're an atheist, that you're sort of like very close-minded, stuff like that, and that you have no meaning. And I think there's definitely space to combat that, in the sense that we should try to normalize atheism, as people like online say very often. But I also think at its core, inevitably, Although I agree that there should be probably more content that just shows, you know, the humanity aspect of it, right? That there are people just like you and I and all the people that you know, that are atheists, and there's nothing wrong with that necessarily. But like, I don't think you're ever going to really like at some point you have to talk about your beliefs, in my opinion, because that is what atheism is about, ultimately, fundamentally, right? Like, I think it's sort of unescapable that at some point, when you talk with religious people, the question of why do you believe what you believe comes up, and at that point, I don't know exactly how much you can do without sort of being in this sort of framework. Then, of course, you might not know that much about it, and you don't have to really like know everything about it or be super in depth in this stuff. But like the fact that you're going to end up there, I think, is pretty strong. Like from my perspective, at least.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I guess my view on that is that by and large, most people won't challenge a religious person on why they have a religious view. Atheists might, some atheists might, that's fine, but by and large, it's acceptable. It's just accepted. If somebody says they're a Christian, that's okay. But I mean, I know personally, and I know anecdotal evidence is not great, but I know personally when I've said I'm an atheist, even like people who aren't particularly religious have been like, why? Like that you must believe that there's something, and they really dig deep and like question it and stuff. And I guess like I think that you're right in that sense that, I think atheists are the target of that a lot more, and I guess we don't feel like we have to justify that position to ourselves. Like we shouldn't have to, unless we're getting involved in these communications with religious people, like actively, like we do. We shouldn't feel like we have to justify that to anyone else. And there should be frameworks or not. Well, I say frameworks, but I mean that loosely in the terms of like generally speaking, for atheists to be able to follow something, to be able to like understand what their meaning is, understand like why they're here, or understand how to cope with like even just guidance and comfort and community, those things. And that's just so absent. That's like the most absent thing I've like. There's literally none of it.
Yeah.
So, but I totally agree that people do need, like, they need to have at least an element of like justification for why they're an atheist. They can't just be like, I don't.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Like, I sort of am. I like to talk about these things, right? And of course, that doesn't mean that everyone should like to talk about these things. But I do think that everyone should strive to be rational, right? And at some point, I do think that if you strive to be rational, like you have to have some sort of justification for what you believe.
Yeah.
I agree that that's not like that many Christians don't do that, right? They just go on living their lives and no one questions them and stuff like that. But I would say that even for those Christians as well, they should have justification for their beliefs if they want to be considered rational. Now, I agree with you that just because like you don't have to feel like you have to justify this to every random person that you find online, right? Like this sort of goes a bit into the discussion of proof and justification and that, right? But you're not obliged to do anything. Like if someone goes and say, yeah, justify this to me right now, or you're rational, like you don't have to reply to that. You can just move on, right? There's no obligation to do that unless you sort of want to engage in that discussion. Then of course things change. But otherwise, I don't think you should feel like this immense pressure to justify. Like as long as you internally have an idea about why you believe what you believe and are consistent within that, I think that's fine.
Yeah, I think that belief, like the justification to yourself, needs to be a bit stronger than not enough evidence or no evidence.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
I guess is the other thing that I've thought about a lot, and I think this is because I work with people with learning disabilities. Is so people with learning disabilities, I think, find it easier to understand religion than to understand atheism currently. Because of its simple messages, and I think to reach a point where and because of the foundational layer within society where everything's talking about afterlives, everything's talking about spirits, ghosts, souls, mediums, all that stuff. It's very present in society. And I guess those individuals. Oh, my camera's gone off. It's back again. Those individuals won't necessarily be able to engage in those conversations or understand the concepts or the information that most of the atheist community online are sharing. So it's very inaccessible. So there's not even almost an option there for them to be able to have a space or have a kind of place in that community. And I think actually a lot of the atheist community is kind of like somebody gets things wrong, they're almost like vultures with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so.
So
even within the atheist community itself, you say something that isn't what other atheists say. You get oh, you're a theist troll or similar. There's a lot of othering that goes on.
Yeah, and that's between two. Like, I would say we're all quite intelligent guys, right? Relatively intelligent.
I wouldn't say I was.
I would say you are, Joe. You understand some very complex topics. I hate your self-deprecation. I hate it. Passion. And you, Philip, you're not excluded from this either.
Okay.
Dave, you don't self-deprecate. You do it as a joke, so you know how intelligent you are. So we're all fairly intelligent guys. We understand relatively complex topics. Maybe some topics more than others, and we're having these discussions, and we're getting things wrong, or other people are getting things wrong, and there's a debate going on, and that it just excludes so much of the population. Just so many people are just like just left out because the topics are too highbrow for them, or too inaccessible, too abstract. I say philosophy is really abstract. I really struggle with it because of the way that I think about things. I have to really try and process that information in order to try and understand what possible worlds are and stuff like that. Those concepts are very difficult for me to grasp, and but I'm starting to. And I've got a master's degree, so how do you guys think we can lower that a bit? What do you think is
Fart jokes?
Fart jokes are
Yeah. That's kind of why we do our stream the way we do it, to try and bring it down and make it more accessible. Although there is still that inaccessibility to it.
Yeah, I think as with some concepts, right? You can attempt to bring it down as much as you can, but from a certain point on, it's very hard to simplify.
You're losing the actual,
exactly. You can have different levels of explanations for things, and to just as a comment on the other thing, right? That sometimes when an atheist gets something wrong, then other atheists pile onto that, and then just that happens sometimes. But to me, I increasingly think that it's not a problem if you don't understand these things, right? You shouldn't feel bad for not understanding these things, and you shouldn't feel bad for making an observation that you find very reasonable, but that maybe, if you know a bit more about this stuff, is not that reasonable, right? I don't think that's a problem. I just think it is a problem when you are sort of bashing the other side, with this 1000% confidence with concepts that are just completely very, very weak comparatively, right? That you become so sure of yourself and so in your own mind that you cannot see that you don't want to sort of approach the conversation from a learning perspective, right? I want to find out what you believe and why, and sort of how would you say, how would you respond to what I'm saying? But you just sort of throw these one-liners in there to just shut the other person down, and now you're the winner and something like that, right? That's what I find very irritating, and that's something that I would go against if I see that behavior online. That's not to say that everyone who makes these comments actually, some of them probably are just have heard this and genuinely think that this is a good objection. I did so a while back, right? This is not. It's not I always understood these things, and I'm sure there are many things that I don't yet understand, and maybe I'm going to look back in 2 weeks or so and find some comment that I made stupid. But the approach, the way you approach it, is important in my opinion. Not necessarily what you know now, your knowledge level that you have now.
Yeah, and I think that's a real key thing for me, because I think what Duke said in what the hell is going? My computer's just okay. My computer's just doing something weird. What Duke said in the FFA, I think, really actually made the whole atheist community of Austin doing it again. Go away.
What's it doing?
It's just like verifying different programs. I don't know why. Anyway, that whole atheist community of Austin approach, understandable to me. I then understood why they were acting in their way, in a response to essentially
a political
political approach, combative against the ideology of religion overriding them and saying that they're not worth anything, and that really hit home. And I think what that leads to, and I think most of the atheist community online is American, which is why we probably don't get that stuff, because I don't think any of us have experienced that really. What that means is that automatically they're going to be more aggressive. So that's why the atheist community online is so aggressive and so trying to establish itself and trying to validate itself, when actually people who are asking genuine questions, who might be interested, who might be closeted atheists, but not quite sure, because all of their community are saying God exists, and they're like, well, I need to test the water with this, but I need to do it underhand so other people don't find out or whatever. They're asking genuine questions, and then they get met with volatility. They're just going to push those people away.
Which is just going to push people away.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Jinx.
But yeah, it's true. And I think that's one of the bad ways that atheists sort of handle these conversations, because they want other people to become atheists. They want the world to sort of kick off that religion. But whenever somebody approaches them honestly and earnestly, unless they're using the right words, making the right things, saying the right things, they just sort of turn on them. So it makes those looking to leave think, well, it's not really the kind of place I want to be.
Why would I want to go into a community that is so hateful?
Yeah, in a way, yes.
Yeah.
But you think about that, so many other groups who are overly impassioned in their stance act in these negative ways. One I bring up is quite often is how some of the holier than thou vegans act. Right, most vegans pretty chill. They do have a moral standpoint, but they don't get all up in your face. But you always hear about the ones that do things like throwing pig's blood over people at a restaurant, and you start thinking, well, I don't want to be part of that community. And I know that's not actually a good justification against veganism. I know it's not, but there is part of you that goes, well, I don't want to be part of that community. And the same thing happens with a lot of atheists online. They're very aggressive, they're very shouty, they're acting terribly, and people go, well, I don't want to be part of that community. And it's like, okay, that's not actually a good justification for maintaining your belief in God, but that is the way we're going to work. We are a tribal species. We are a social species. We look for this sort of community thing. And if we don't have a particularly approachable community, and we keep claiming that there is no community...
That's another big one,
right? And the way I see it, there's a few things that religion offers people, the layperson, and that's comfort, community, and something else. I can't remember what it is, but it's that stability. It's that kind of knowing you're going to have people to rely on. It's knowing that there's people with shared views that are going to be able to comfort you when you're in distress. And well, God is a comfort as well. you know, and
Yeah.
why don't we try to emanate that in atheism? It's not
Can't
gonna
have dogma.
work. Well, it's not dogma. It's not having a group of people meet up to have a film night or to talk about, you know, how we're like what to do when somebody's bereaved, or any one of these things that you hear in sermons in church. The reason people keep going back is because they're being comforted. You don't need dogma. You do not need dogma to do that.
No, but you will have. I've had this conversation with a few atheists online, and they've gone, well, you know, they should go for humanism and deal with it that way, and find other groups and da, da, da. And it's just like, but you realise you're not actually offering people a good alternative.
No.
You know.
Well, and this is the thing. I think I've written this in the book I'm writing about this topic. That humanism is one step further removed from somebody's journey, right? I didn't find out about humanism until a couple of years ago. I barely knew what it was until a couple of years ago, and I've been an atheist for like 10 years, basically. Like somewhat of an atheist for longer than that. But, you know, it's just people label themselves as atheists. That's the first point of contact. So why would they then have to find another label in order to try and be part of a community? It just doesn't make sense. It's like, you know, stop adding steps in to get to that point.
It's true. And the other side is, I mean, there are more of them coming out now, but you think about things with people who are dealing with addiction. Nearly all of these talk, you know, these 12 steps thing, accept a higher power and so on and so forth. There are, I mean, we've actually got a link to one of them on Answers and Reason, to dealing about, you know, rehab and things like that deal with it from an atheist perspective. But there generally don't seem to be those many things like that either. And again, it's that dismissive attitude of that's not for atheists to deal with.
Yeah.
Well, who's going to deal with it for atheists if we don't deal with it?
Yeah, yeah. That's. I think that's the key for me, is that we need to start looking after our own. You know, and even if there's like differences of opinion about what it means or whatever, like you're totally right, Joe, about, you know, stuff like AA. Like, then
am I the only one with audio issues that is not able to hear what?
Yeah, working my end. Can you hear me?
It's working my end.
No,
Is it just?
so I cannot hear Bearded Heretic. Like, I cannot hear Luke.
Can you guys hear me?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah.
I just like it started with. Also, I think Chesh is here.
Chesh?
Yeah.
I snuck in.
Oh,
Yeah, hello,
Chesh.
So she's here.
Chesh, you're coming right to the end. Hello.
Hi, I'm sneaky. I got time zone confused.
Oh, it's probably because we didn't have we had our, what's it called, recently, not that long ago, the daylight savings. Okay.
I hate daylight savings.
Yeah, there's no need for it these days, right? That's what we got alarm clocks for, right? And how many people are farmers
Right.
anyway?
Change the world by half an hour and just leave it there.
There you go.
How many
Best
people
of
are
both
farmers?
worlds.
Because they did it for farmers originally, didn't they? But how many people are farmers, really?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think now the main it has to do with like transportation.
Oh,
So like truck drivers and stuff, I think is what their excuse is now, but I'm not sure.
Need to put up more lights on the roads, basically.
Philip, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I'm guessing
Philip,
that's
can you hear Luke?
Yeah, I like it's lagging on my side, but just for Luke, I don't know why.
Yeah, it's lagging. Luke's lagging for me. as
Oh,
well.
okay, so I'm
Same.
not the only one.
Damn it.
And it's quite funny, actually, because you sort of talk, and then your voice comes out a little bit later.
How long later?
Yeah, just like that.
Like about a second and a half.
That's a long
Long
time.
enough to look like a really bad dub.
Yeah.
There's a girl I saw on I think it was Instagram or whatever, who does like a delayed voice thing. So she goes like, "Hey," and it's like really cool. And she was like, imagine just walking up to people and just being like having a delayed voice, but in reality. Is Chesh talking? I can't hear her.
Oh, we've lost you.
I muted myself. I was just kind of like thinking about. I was thinking about that in like a bar.
Yeah.
Hey, can
Yeah.
I order you a drink?
Cool. So Chesh, just to bring you up to speed, we're just talking about some of the like the grassroots stuff, essentially around atheism and like how, from my perspective, coming into or the reason that I came onto YouTube and to Twitter and stuff as an atheist was because I saw like basically a gap in the community where, you know, stuff like the things that religion provides that atheism doesn't, like comfort, kind of purpose and like community, it's just not being emanated at all in the atheist community, and in fact it's being denied in certain cases where people are saying we're not a community, that's not our responsibility, and stuff like that, and one, why that might be happening, and two, how we can maybe try and figure out how to get around that.
I think the things that I've seen that are sort of beneficial in one way is like, yeah, kind of, it's not really on atheism to build community, but maybe secular humanism might fill that gap better than just atheism does, because atheism doesn't really say anything about much of what your political beliefs are. It doesn't really say much or anything about anything about you. It says very little. So it's hard for something that says so little about an individual, whereas a lot of religions are based around political views, based around morality issues. And so because atheism is so kind of current, it doesn't have to be, but is currently very open-ended about stuff like that, it doesn't do a very good job of bringing people together in that way. Although, there's enough people in the community that go out of their way to make that difficult. But besides that, it's maybe secular humanism might fill that gap better than I think maybe the philosophical position of atheism might, because then you could have people who are just like, I just want life to be better for people in general. How do we get together and have, like, I don't know, sing around a fire karaoke night sort of thing? I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, and we've covered the couple of the issues that I have with secular humanism specifically, which are that, one, most humanist societies look at big topics like, atheists are being killed in X country, or
gay people are getting attacked here or there, exactly. Can't exist. So I think that's fine to have those big groups, and I think that's great. It's more, what's lacking is the smaller local community stuff. So like if you walk down the street and there's a church on every block and it's a different kind of church, everybody's kind of got a place to go to. But if you want to build something like that's secular, how do you do that, and how do you attract people to that thing? And I think the best way would just to be doing, one, charities, and two, things like, it's a movie night and we put up a thing and everybody's coming to watch a movie, or there's a whatever.
Yeah,
gonna sing Kumbaya or some crap. I don't know. I
kind of feel like that community can only be built online.
I feel like currently, yeah, because of all the covfefe going around. But but if you're talking on a local level, like, I get just as much community going to the bar and being like, I go to this bar regularly, and so I know the regulars, I know the staff, and we do whatever, where we have a trivia night or we have whatever night's going on at the bar, and so I kind of get that community from the bar, and so I don't know.
Yeah, but how would you do that from an atheist perspective? I think if we're thinking about, I understand what you mean from the secular humanist perspective, but if one of the things people are worried about leaving religion is having no community, why would we then say, well, here, go look at secular humanism if you want a community, and you need secular humanism to change to be more local anyway. But let's just say we could get it a little bit more local. Realistically, the only change that's actually going to come from is actually from atheists who are actually putting the effort in to do it.
Yeah.
it's not necessarily atheism itself being this, but if we were actually all atheists put the effort in to doing this sort of thing and got the ball rolling, then it would be, well, atheism can offer this, and then you can say it's a secular humanist society, but I'm part of it, and so on, if you want it. But it's sort of in saying that we do these things. I've got a friend who actually there's no charity in her area other than working with the church. She's an atheist herself, but she works with the church because that's how she can give back, because there isn't actually anything to do it. So she's an atheist doing good work via the church because that is the only way she can do it in her area.
Right. I mean, I'm all for atheists just getting more involved in their local communities. It's sure, but I think there's probably too many atheists that are too busy online.
Arguing with memes.
Listen, if you're gonna, this is something that I saw Brittany Simon talk about. Steve and I talked about this recently. We were talking about it on Rum and Coke with Landon. This has been kind of a topic that has been going around recently, and it's just that if you are a keyboard warrior, you're not actually helping. You have a hard time if you're going out and you're shutting down conversation and you're stopping people and saying, listen, no, you're not allowed to have this conversation because I say so, or it makes me uncomfortable. It gives people this self-satisfaction, this self-righteousness that they've been, look at, I stood up for those people over there who didn't ask me to by shitting on that person over there, so I don't have to do anything now. And so that was me doing the thing. But if people spent less time trying to shut people down and tear people down and decided to be more active, even just in their local community, that would do, I think, a lot to just take a couple steps forward.
I'd agree.
I agree, but I also would say that, for instance, like there are issues that are connected with religion that usually religion answers, right? But when people leave religion, then that sort of, there is a gap there. I don't know if that can be filled by humanism or if there should be like an atheist community. I don't think that's a good idea.
Like spiritualism stuff that you might be able to fill it with, because like, you think spiritual and you automatically go to God. You automatically go to religion. You automatically go to whatever. It doesn't have to be that way.
It doesn't have to be.
Harris talks about that a lot. And so maybe if more atheists were more open to either that kind of language or that kind of conversation, then maybe atheism would be able to fill maybe that sort of spiritual community gap. But until atheists, I guess, lighten up a little bit and stop on their version of a crusade on the keyboard, then I don't know.
I think that to me is kind of the key issue with online atheism currently, is it's still trying to justify its existence. And like I feel like that work's been done. We can move a little bit further forwards now and start to be like, okay, I'm from a religious. I'm not actually from a religious community, but imagine I was. I'm from a religious community. I'm an atheist. Someone who's close to me has just died, and everyone's telling me they're in a better place, and that's not what I believe. Therefore, it's stressing me out, because it's like I can't consolidate the fact that I think that they no longer exist. Yeah, and that can be quite traumatizing, having that kind of like constantly said to you. And I think that having like-minded people around you, having people that are able to go to comfort you in a way that meets your expectation and meets your needs,
it almost seems like we don't know enough. Like we don't have enough common knowledge about either psychology or about therapy techniques to comfort those people. Right. So like, how do you accept death as an atheist? Right. And now if you're going to have that conversation about that and spirituality and psychology, the more we know and the more common that knowledge is among people, the easier something like that is. I mean, with religion, it's just like snap answer. Oh, they're in a better place. Oh, they're with God now. Like, that's just like such an easy thing for them to say, because that's how long they've been around to create that, to build that community. And atheism, as it is now, just has not been around long enough. And we don't have yet commonalities to say. And I don't even think atheism atheists have all figured out if they're all on the same page yet. And until everybody's kind of on the same page, you can't really build that sort of community.
There's even a general rejection of any commonalities. They'll say the only thing that is common between us is that we lack a belief in gods. And that's generally the line that goes.
And even then, it doesn't even everybody agrees.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, that's the thing. Like, we can't even agree on that. So it's really hard to move forward. And I think really we need to move forward from topics like that as well. Don't get me wrong. I sometimes enjoy discussing, definitions and logic and things like that, but they're not actually that important. They're important when they're confusing the conversation. If you want to nail down a definition just to use for the conversation, that's great. They're also good to address when they say something only means this. It's like, well, no, it can mean this, this, and this. But if you want to use that for your conversation, then we'll go with that for now.
That's kind of what I mean when I just think that online atheists need to calm down and maybe stop trying to take on everything. Because I do notice that a lot, where it's like, well, I'm an atheist and I want good for humanity, so I need to take on every single thing that's out there. And it's like, okay, listen, calm down, take a breath. It's okay. You can disagree about definitions, and it's really not a big deal. You don't have to trick theists into converting them into this thing that you don't have a very good understand. Like, that's nebulous as of right now, at least as a community.
And you shouldn't hate people for having a different definition of
just
what you think.
Just take a chill pill.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. I guess the things that I think are absolutely key to what atheism needs to start to bring to the table are more mundane, but more important than the stuff that we're talking about. And I love talking about this philosophy stuff. It breaks my brain, but I love talking about it. I love talking about psychology. I love that stuff. But is it going to influence like my life a whole lot? Probably not. But what is going to influence my life is I mean, it could do. I could go down the route of Khalilullah, but probably not. I doubt it. I feel like I have an established belief. But what is going to influence my life is like the real life kind of trauma I go through at some point, or trying to figure out what my purpose is and stuff. That's and it's mundane. It's really boring stuff, but it's necessary.
I think that maybe there is a very large misunderstanding of philosophy, thinking that like, oh, it's so hoity-toity. If you're talking about philosophy, or you're talking about like these concepts that are just way out there, and sometimes you are, but sometimes you're just talking about how do you have a discussion with your boss or your coworker or your kid, like your teenage kid. How do you get them to be able to understand you? And so that is such a mix of communication, psychology, and philosophy between just those three things, and being able to have an understanding and being able to discuss those things on a level where people aren't just screeching at each other with memes means that everybody kind of that's if you want to build a community, that's how you do it. You need to be able to communicate, you need to be able to understand each other, you need to be able to give and take. But what we find a lot in the atheist community is they're very demanding and they're not willing to give anything back.
Yeah.
Right.
And I did say earlier, Chesh, you weren't here. I think part of that is because, like, so for me, the first point of contact when I was looking for atheist YouTube was Atheist Community of Austin guys, GM Skeptic, Cosmic Skeptic, and Rationality Rules. And apart from the British two, Cosmic Skeptic and Rationality Rules, they're all from Texas, which is a very kind of like religious place, and they are fighting against religious dogma in order, and that puts them in a position where they become quite defensive and closed. And then because that's the main point of contact when you meet YouTube, that's how it spreads to everyone else, because they adopt that kind of mindset, even though they might not be in that position. Like, I'm not in that position, but when I looked at atheist YouTube like 5 or 6 years ago, that's how I kind kind of approached it, it was because of that.
Yeah, I think that's something that we talked about when we were going over Arendt's blog. And we talked about how you are one small group of people in one very particular part of the world demanding that everybody view things the way you do. And that's just not the case. That when you're talking online, when you're talking on the internet, not everybody is from America. Not everybody is from this place or that place. People are coming from different points of view. And so to make demands about you have to not only view things this way, but you also have to treat them and behave in the way that I'm demanding you behave without telling you ahead of time. You have to just blindly guess and hope you don't mess up and they just crucify you over it. It makes for a very like walking on eggshells tentative place. So I didn't actually ever end up being able to get involved with the atheist community. And the reason is because I talked to Steve. So I was annexed from the atheist community before I was even allowed to say anything to anybody. I was like not allowed to be there. And the only reason I wasn't allowed to be there is because people knew I had talked to Steve a couple of times. So it was really bizarre. It was a really bizarre kind of introduction to the community when I actually like started participating. It was weird. So you had these people that are like, oh, we're so welcoming. Oh, we're so nice. Oh, hey, yeah, you're an atheist. That's cool. We got a place for you. We're going to support you. Oh, no, not you. You get the fuck out of here. So, okay.
Yeah.
Because of definitions.
That's it, isn't it? Yeah. And
My favorite.
You don't define it. We don't have any dogma, but if you're not going to adhere to our definition, that is a form of dogma.
Oh, one of my favorites is like one of the situations I was in didn't even have anything to do with philosophy or religion. So part of the reason I was sort of like, was I saw on Twitter Steve arguing with Godless Engineer. But they were both saying the same thing in different ways, which was kind of funny. Steve was saying that the word engineer to him means this specific thing. And Godless Engineer is a software engineer. So he was saying there's a difference between an engineer who's legally allowed to sign off on papers and a software engineer. So the word engineer doesn't really, like his brain doesn't take that. So the umbrella term engineer is maybe too large. And Godless Engineer is saying, well, I'm still an engineer. I can't sign off papers. That doesn't make me not an engineer. And it's like, yeah. So I came in and said, you realize you guys are agreeing, right? He called me a stupid bitch and blocked me.
Oh my God.
I was like, oh, okay.
And it's just, you know what? It's just like, I just don't get that kind of level of like intensity about like words.
Well, that was it. That was that defensive nature. That was like, oh, I'm being attacked all the time. So if anybody questions me or if anybody asks or has a different opinion or a different idea about how to approach something, even if it's not an attack on them, oh, if you say that that person's not an engineer, it means you're calling them stupid and they're a bad person. And it's like, that's not what anybody said, though.
And a community
like, it's the same thing.
Right?
I've seen it a few times.
You know, a community can disagree with each other. Like, you know,
they should be able to.
Well, yeah, I mean, Chesh, we have slight disagreements about the whole Richard Dawkins thing. Doesn't mean that we're like not gonna communicate or have discussions and stuff. In fact, my opinion of it became more nuanced through conversation. I still don't necessarily agree entirely with your position.
Yeah, and so did mine, because you guys brought up a couple of points that I was like, oh no, I didn't consider that. I don't know if I entirely agree with that, but I understand where that's coming from. So I made some adjustments to what I had thought about it and being like, well, this or that, right?
Yeah, and that's healthy, and it's healthy to, you know, like, me and my friends have a massive disagreement that comes up all the time where we have like basically full-on shouting matches about it, and that's whether the Asgardians in the Marvel Cinematic Universe can use magic or not, or whether it's just technology, and it's a massive fight. It's like we get into it, and this is that, but that is as fickle to me as the kind of the discussions around.
Listen, the answer is there's only doom. The thing is that it's part of this comes from, one, a defensiveness. I think you guys are right about that. Two, a dogma. I think you're right about that. I think there's a third factor, and it has to do with not recognizing when harm is actually being caused. Right. And so you're taking something that is mundane and blowing it up as if this person is like, this person has blood on their hands. This person is causing harm and going out of their way to basically allow or encourage other people to cause physical harm and go out and attack these other people. And it's like that you've jumped the shark so far that because they have an opinion, or they're thinking about, or they're asking about this thing, that they are now therefore causing harm to this group over here because they're questioning something that, and like I don't, because we disagree, I don't think you're causing harm to anybody. And I don't think you guys would think the same of me, because there's no advocacy for any harm at all going on.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's another, it's kind of similar to a point we raised earlier about, I can't remember what it was now. Literally left my brain.
I mean, it comes with dogma, right? So if you are talking to a religious person, you think religion are bad, and if they're religious, therefore they're bad people. And it's like, well, no, not necessarily. If I have a question about something and somebody goes, oh, well, that person would use that as a talking point. Well, so what if they would? I'm not. I'm just asking.
Yeah. So the point that we raised earlier was that there might be religious people who are asking questions. They are religious, but they're like closeted atheists who are in situations where they might be kind of exploring their beliefs a little bit, and they're asking questions in order to try and like see where they fit in, and they're getting a kind of like a combative response, and that just pushes them away rather than actually being a hole for them.
Yeah, it's this weird quality over or quantity over quantity sort of idea, but at the same time doing the opposite. So it's the idea that we don't care who it is, we just want the most number of people, and we're going to put the most number of people under our heading as possible. But by doing so, you're actually alienating people away from your cause, including theists who would probably join you in your cause. People have, I think it actually has to do with the location, because they're from Austin, Texas, the southern part of the United States that is very religious. They think that, or they equate politics with religion for everybody, which isn't the case. Nice. So, where they're from, it makes sense, because a lot of the religious right down there votes as a block. So all of the religious people, because they're part of that religion, will vote in this direction. But that's not the case everywhere. If I go down this, I'm in Canada. If I go down the street over there and I say, if I walk into a church and I say, hey, do you guys think churches should be taxed? A lot of people in the church will say yes. Because God doesn't dictate your politics necessarily, especially about things that aren't even in the book anywhere.
And I think a lot of theists agree with secularism. I think a lot of theists agree that church and state shouldn't be mixed, that a state shouldn't be religious in.
But you wouldn't think that online, right? You wouldn't think that atheists would recognize that, at least with the way they speak. They try to change people's opinion about God instead of changing their opinion about abortion. because changing the opinion about abortion or about God would mean they have to change their opinion about abortion. And surprise, no, they don't.
Well, that's why Jesus mythicism is so big, I think, because if they can throw Jesus out completely, therefore it means they're going to lose everything to do with their religion. Yeah. But actually, it's a terrible argument. And as you say, you should address each individual argument rather than
Well, and it's not what the lay religious people care about. They care about they're not thinking about Kalam's cosmological argument when they're thinking about their religion. They're not thinking about those things.
There's definitely things that there's a value to reaching out to the other side to get them to question their opinion. Yeah. But it's another thing to demand that the other side do it, then refuse to do it yourself, and then start going into personal attacks and trying to slander people to avoid doing that thing.
Do you know what? Something we could actually compare the ACA with is, you know how anti-vaxxers in America, one of their big arguments, and I know they've got a number of them, but one of the big arguments is the whole big pharma thing, and how they're making so much money and they have to pay for every vaccination, and they've got this massive vaccine schedule. And then you look at places which have universal healthcare, and nearly every single one of those vaccines is on there. And you're like, okay, so if it really was all about money and these things didn't help you or they hurt you in some way, do you think these countries with universal healthcare would put them on the schedule?
Well, the best irony about that is that the people who are anti-vaxxers also have a tendency to be on the right, which are opposed to universal healthcare, which, if you had universal healthcare, would undercut big pharma.
There's a lot of ironies in politics.
I don't.
There's a lot of ironies in politics. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same with anti-maskers or people who are anti-lockdown, also being anti-vaxxers. It's like, well, how do you think we're going to come out of lockdown? By getting vaccines to prevent us from getting sick when we get it.
There are some really good arguments for being opposed to a lockdown. Being opposed to masks is kind of dumb.
Really
being
dumb.
Opposed to lockdown, I understand a little bit more because there's more nuance to that sort of a discussion. You can talk about business. You can talk about people's livelihood and their safety.
Yeah.
You can talk about like people realizing their marriage is garbage because they have to live together now. Like there are things you can talk about, but one of the things that's going on up here right now is people are calling for the Premier of Ontario to step down and get the hell out of Dodge because he refuses to implement paid sick leave as as a mandate across the province. And so it's like, he went out and said, hey, listen, everybody who works at groceries, you millennials that do these jobs, you're frontliners now, and you guys are really important. I need you to go to your jobs. And then there was an uptick in the people who were getting corona, and it was the millennials. And so the guy said, oh, well, you millennials need to take this seriously. You won't give us sick days that we're paying for. You force us to go to work when we're sick, and you're blaming us for the thing. So people are pissed. It's actually kind of funny.
Yeah, the UK has had similar situations there, and it's so dumb. But segue. Coming back, I guess actually, I think we've run over. So for this, maybe draw it to a close. I guess I think we've touched on a lot of the kind of the points I wanted to raise and get into the nuance of it and understanding why the community online is the way it is. And I guess it's just kind of reinforced my views there. I do think there needs to be a space for people to understand this stuff, and that's what I'm trying to set up. I guess is that kind of like just awareness.
You need to start with a solution.
The quality, I think the quality versus quantity issue. If atheists want to kind of fix the dogmatic style and get away from that and work more towards building a community, there's 4 things that they need to focus on. First off is stop this quantity versus quality nonsense. If you're bringing somebody out of a dogmatic way of thinking, you need to educate them on critical thinking and how to avoid dogmatic thinking.
Yeah.
Stop trying to take advantage of the fact that they're already dogmatic to bring them to your side. That's kind of douchey. The next is that there needs to be a better understanding of philosophy, since we've got a good number of people who are discussing these topics like religion and morality without understanding that they're actually in the domain of philosophy. So just like Howard, there was a big push about biology and evolutionary theory, there needs to be a big push like that when it comes to epistemology and philosophy, in my opinion.
At least if they're going to be having those conversations.
If they're
going to avoid them, you don't need it. But if you're going to get involved in a topic, you need some.
Yeah, so you need to recognize what topic you're a part of and have some kind of at least base understanding. So if I explain it this way, when kind of atheism did its blow up on the internet, you have like the Viced Rhinos, you have the Godless Engineer, you have that whole slew of people that were all talking about evolutionary theory and talking about, Alex and genetically modified skeptic, rationality rules, all of them. They're all doing this, but all of them had like a pretty solid understanding of at least evolutionary theory. They need the same thing with philosophy if they're going to keep having these conversations. It doesn't have to be them, but if there's people that do the same kind of thing, but in this other topic of an epistemology and philosophy, it will help educate a lot of atheists. But the thing is we have to work together, which means we need groups like the ACA, not only understanding that this is a thing, but also recognizing what resources there are so they know where to send people if they don't want to have the discussion. So if they're doing their call-in, they're doing their atheist experience thing, and they're like, listen, we're using the lack of belief thing. Fine, no problem. But if somebody comes to you talking about philosophy, don't say, no, you're wrong, you, and hang up the phone. You say, we're not using that definition here. If you want to discuss that, go over here. And that will help educate, and you want community, you have to work together.
Yeah, and I guess it will balance it out. And I in terms of like, you know, you'll then start to have people kind of identifying with certain groups, but then not being hateful or resentful of other groups.
The animosity is not
there won't be any animosity, and there'll be essentially you'll have a community that's bigger, because you can clump them together, and there'll be debates and stuff, but
you'll
like,
have right. And so what you'll have is you'll have these debates among atheists that will open up conversation for people who are theists, who will be able to join in and even pick a side between atheists. If atheists always are in lockstep having these discussions, so let's say you've got an anti-vaxxer who's an atheist, and an anti-vaxxer who's and a pro-vaxxer who's an atheist. You now have two atheists having this discussion instead of a theist and an atheist, because all atheists need to believe the same thing.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
So,
yeah.
It opens up the forum of conversation a lot more, where the God part of the discussion doesn't come into the discussion, because you have two atheists having the discussion. And so what that does, if you want to get theists to question whether or not their reasoning behind something is good, if you can remove God from the conversation, you want to change their minds about politics? God doesn't need to be involved in the politics. If their only reason is God, then they go and look at the conversations about God, yes or no. Then they go search those things out. So you open up these conversations to so many different people and it not only broadens your scope and gives you more people, but it gives you more people that are better educated and better at having conversation, and that are less at each other's throats all the time over what amounts to a big nothing burger.
Yeah. And I think additionally to that, there needs to be these, at least a space, or just like some level of discussion about the more like mundane aspects of atheism, the implications that come along with that. Because, and I think that for me, the lack of belief, like view, doesn't help with that, because people kind of reject the fact that it does have implications on their life. But when you don't believe in an afterlife, when you don't believe in like somebody guiding, or like a being guiding your actions, and the morality from a certain text and stuff, that stuff you have to establish within yourself. You have to find a replacement for that, because that's just how it works. If you don't believe that it's a deity, then you have to. And I think the only exception to that, I think, is like deists, for instance, who also have to find that stuff because they don't believe that the deity has a personal relationship with them or something. But if you're not a theist, like in the sense of like, you know, the Abrahamic religions, then you have to find that stuff. And that to me is just like, that conversation needs to be had, and people need to be open to having it.
Right. Well, if you open up that conversation for atheists to be allowed to disagree with each other, it definitely leaves a pocket open for a deist to have a lot easier time coming into the conversation.
Yeah, because a lot of the things will be the same. There's just a very small difference, I think, between a deist and an atheist.
I think there probably needs to be a general acceptance of, just because I understand or I acknowledge your point doesn't mean I agree with you. So I can acknowledge that this person has a good point about whatever, but I come to a different conclusion than they do. Okay, no, that's a reasonable argument. That makes sense to me. I've acknowledged that your point has value. It might not change my mind. It might not be enough to what I need. It might not be convincing to me. But if you don't acknowledge what is and is not evidence, if you don't acknowledge what is and is not a point, did you guys watch Steve talking about Aaron's chat with that group of Muslim men?
Yeah, we talked about it.
They make really good points, and Aaron is unable to acknowledge that they've got a point. And because he's unable to acknowledge that they've even got a point, he can't address the point, and he just makes himself look like a jerk who's not listening, right?
Yeah.
So if you can't acknowledge that somebody else might have a point, you're gonna have a bad time. You're not gonna be able to have any conversations.
Yeah. I think just looking at the time, I think all of that has been really helpful in terms of kind of like framing what I want to achieve, and I think everyone here is on the same page with that. And I've definitely got some food for thought for like future articles and future videos. So thank you guys for that. And
that's right.
I guess I'm going to bring this part to a close because we're going to have another conversation about something different for air. So yeah, thank you guys for that. That was really good.